Welcome to the Esoteric Worlds. I'm Chokri, hypnotherapist and medium. Today, I'm sharing with you a new experience from my journey. Open your mind and let's dive together into the invisible worlds. Hello and welcome everyone to the very first episode of the Esoteric Worlds. Today, I wanted to reflect on the following question. Are we all mediums? Is it a gift? Or is it more of a curse? Before answering this question, or these questions, let's first define mediumship, or rather, mediumships, because there isn't just one. Mediumship isn't necessarily the image of the gypsy grandmother, weighing over 100 kilos in her caravan with her. A big crystal ball and her tarot cards, reading your future in the lines of your hand or in coffee grounds. Here, I'm exaggerating as much as possible so you can see the image portrayed by movies and TV shows. So, for me, a medium isn't necessarily someone who predicts the future. We usually call that a clairvoyant, someone who claims to predict the future. But in my opinion, they're more blind than clairvoyant. We'll see that clairvoyants are often wrong, and their predictions are inaccurate. All right, I haven't lost you so far. You're still alive. You're still here. Good, we can keep going. A medium is someone who has access to the esoteric world, the invisible world, if you will. It could be someone who sees ghosts or someone who hears souls, which is also my case. And I'll talk more about that later in this podcast. It could also be someone who has access to certain information from the past. They meet someone and have access to their past, kind of like a technical sheet, really. When I say past, it could be on this timeline, the person's current earthly past. For example, information about their child, their family, their traumas, their joys, certain events, or so-called past lives, which, in my opinion, are actually parallel lives. At some point, I'll do an episode where I go deeper into this topic. The medium might also sense a particular smell, for example, the smell of cigars, when there's a ghost connected to the person they're consulting who loved them when they were alive. Smoking cigars. That's just one example. Of course, it could be something else. The person themselves might feel a pang in their heart, stomach pains, or goosebumps. They might feel cold even though it's really hot. There are lots of signs that the medium may or may not know how to interpret yet. That comes with time and experience. Is the medium also a clairvoyant? They might have access to certain information about a probable future. And I do mean probable, since there are several timelines and many possible futures. So, any information about the future should always be taken with a grain of salt. Now, what are the different types of mediumship? Let's go into detail. We'll start with clairvoyance, which is the ability to see images, visions, and scenes from the invisible world. Sometimes you see them with the naked eye. Other times you see certain scenes or images in your mind related to the person or related to something specific. This clairvoyance can describe the past, come from the future, or be connected to a ghost, a spirit, or a human. Basically, in all kinds of situations. We'll come back to this in later episodes with concrete examples. Clairaudience is the ability to hear voices or spiritual messages. For some people, it's often described as whispers or distinct sounds. For me, it's more telepathic. Clairsentience is the ability to feel emotions or physical sensations. That's what I described. You might walk into a place and get goosebumps. If, for example, the house is haunted, if there are entities or ghosts, You might get a stomachache or feel a pang in your heart. You can even feel entities touching you sometimes. Or like a breeze sliding over your skin. Sometimes that could be a ghost right next to you. So the person can connect to ghosts, to entities, to a place, to an object, or even to the person in front of them. They can connect to different times, present, past, or future. They can also connect to past lives, so-called past, but actually parallel lives, as I mentioned. There's also automatic writing, a practice where mediums receive messages but don't control their pens. They pick up a pen and it writes mechanically. The medium has no idea what they're going to write, and the writing just comes. It can also be semi-mechanical. They are conscious, but they don't control their hands. And often, it can come from entities, this kind of automatic writing. There's channeling, which is a particular form of mediumship that allows entities posing as guides or angels to speak through the person, to almost take possession of the medium and speak through them. It can be scary sometimes when the channeling is powerful enough for some people. It's a technique I used in esoteric hypnosis at first, but seeing that it didn't change anything in particular to channel. We were taking more risks than anything else. I asked my telepaths. I'll come back to the idea of telepaths in some episodes. I just asked them to talk with the souls or to speak to the entities they saw, to order them to leave or other things. So there you go. They didn't channel anything anymore. Not souls, not entities, not ghosts, nothing. There's also psychometry. It's a form of mediumship where the medium picks up information, emotions, memories, or energies by touching an object. They touch an object and boom, it throws them back into the past. Or even by touching certain people. I had a patient with a wounded soul, and she had this gift that exploded in her after the therapy, after working on her soul wounds. So, she had this gift that emerged. We'll also talk about the ways mediumship gifts can emerge. You should know that objects absorb energetic vibrations and retain certain memories within them. And some mediums, by touching these objects, are able to read and decode these memories to obtain information from the past or present. Certain emotions are associated with the object. It could be a painting, a diamond, or an archaeological artifact. Often, some psychometric mediums, for example, by touching a piece of jewelry, can describe an event connected to that piece of jewelry. Someone was killed who owned this piece of jewelry. It was stolen. It was so. They can really describe certain scenes, certain things they see related to that. There are also astral travelers who have out-of-body experiences during their sleep and can visit certain places, communicate with the invisible world, travel through dimensions, all while remaining very lucid. It's also a form of mediumship. There's also meditation, which allows you to expand your consciousness and to communicate and travel to certain places. It also relaxes our senses. Esoteric hypnosis, I would also put it in that category. Except that esoteric hypnosis is guided by a hypnotist. There are also extrasensory phenomena that allow you to project yourself into a particular place to extend our sight, hearing, taste, smell, and touch. These techniques are also used, notably by major nations, for espionage. I also encourage you to read the books by Robert Monroe. He talks about this in great detail. There are vision plants such as ayahuasca, and there are others as well. These also allow access to invisible worlds. There are certain substances, such as acids, LSD, DMT, some hallucinogenic mushrooms, and MDMA, which also make it possible to access invisible worlds, certain past events that are buried, or even past lives. There are also premonitory dreams, which allow access to information about future events, or present information that is hidden. People at the end of life are often in between worlds and have access to deceased family members who have gone before them. There are animals that can see entities or ghosts, and you can notice this in dogs or cats. There are also some autistic people who can see entities or ghosts. They have access to invisible worlds. So, let's start with the first question. Are we all mediums? That's where we should begin. Let's say that 90% of us are mediums to varying degrees. Some people are born with it. You'll see a lot of children under the age of 6. They'll tell you they've seen this or that entity, this shape, this ghost, this character, here or there, at home or elsewhere, and that they've talked with them. Then, with the conditioning from school and parents, their abilities get blocked, and the mind takes over again. By the way, when I perform esoteric healing on children under 6 or on animals, of course, with the parents' consent, the effects are pretty quick in the physical world. Often, after 2 or 3 weeks, you can see the effects in the physical world. There are also children who grew up without TV or screens, which is rare, who have access to certain mediumistic abilities. I've noticed that quite a bit. Some children keep their ability until adolescence, and then many of them decide to close the doors to mediumship. Very few accept their ability and make use of it into adulthood. Later on, for many people, their mediumship reappears after an emotional shock. A death, a breakup, a divorce, an accident, getting fired, a betrayal, a failure in their life. Infidelity, injustice, no matter the shock, anything that shakes their ego and calls all their beliefs into question. The person they thought they were. A rape as a violent trauma will often open invisible doors that trigger mediumship. There are also entity attacks that, I would say, force the person to trigger their mediumship as a defense mechanism. The same goes for attacks from sorcerers using black magic. It causes exactly the same thing. There could be a move into a home where there is an energy portal. Again, that can trigger spontaneous mediumship. Kundalini, when practicing yoga or meditation, can trigger mediumship and access to the invisible world. Invisible. A spiritual retreat can also trigger certain abilities. There are also NDEs, near-death experiences, which can trigger mediumship in some people. I've had many patients in therapy who, after their NDE or after coming out of a coma, had mediumistic abilities that were triggered. For me, it was triggered as well. After several emotional shocks that really forced me to work on my ego. So, there was an emotional cleansing and, little by little, the evolution of my therapy on soul wounds that led me to gradually evolve my therapy over the years. In my case, it was after a shock. I took 21 days where it was really hard to work on myself. It was intense work. And then new abilities appeared, or rather, abilities that had been dormant started to emerge. These moments of questioning, I would say, these 21-day periods of transformation happen every 7 years. Everyone has their own cycle. I don't know if everyone has a cycle, but in my case, it's every 7 years. In the meantime, there are tough events that happen to me, but they require fewer resources to handle. As a major event, there was my move to Switzerland. Change of continent. I grew up in North Africa, and then I arrived in Switzerland. Overnight, my whole environment changed. There was also a separation at one point with my son. At the same time, I had a physical disability that kept me from walking normally. I lost my father, went through a divorce, moved, lost my job, all at once, all in the same year. I also went through a breakup with a woman. With this woman, I shared 5 past lives. There were extremely strong karmic ties. And the last shock was a major financial loss and a serious period of self-questioning. With each event, new abilities would appear and projects would come to fruition right after. And there were major life changes, like moving to different countries, changes in my professional life, or even new girlfriends. The last event ended up revealing my clairaudience in a very simple way, telepathically, where people spontaneously come up to talk to me. I'll put a link to my website where I explain all of this. You can find it in the description of this podcast. I should also mention that I have a very minimalist, very nomadic lifestyle with no attachments. This matches the many realizations I've had, but also the will of my soul in this incarnation. Now, is being a medium a curse or a gift? Well, for the first 3 weeks after my clairaudience appeared, it was total chaos. Everywhere I went, cafes, the street, men, people would come up to me and want to deliver a message. In short, it never stopped, voices coming from everywhere, and I had to deliver messages to people I didn't even know. So, I had no control over this faucet. It was always on. I really struggled to turn off the faucet to understand how it worked. Anyway, those first 3 weeks were hell. Also, as if it were a curse, when I was a child, I could see entities in the house. That wasn't very fun either, but after a while, you get used to it and you just stop. You stop paying attention to it. It didn't keep me from sleeping as long as those entities didn't bother me or make noise. So yes, at first, it can feel like a curse, but later on. Without me choosing it, my soul asked me. Like in the movie The Godfather, it made me an offer I couldn't refuse, to do soul readings and add that service to my website. You know, when you don't listen to what your soul is asking of you, you pay for it, big time. So I chose to listen. So I started offering this service, and then the healing sessions. It was the patient's soul telling me what to do, since I had a lot of therapeutic tools. So it was much simpler in the end. But I'll talk more about that in other episodes, about energy healing and soul readings. I think that's good for this very first episode. If you want to share your own stories about this, if you yourself have some mediumistic abilities, how it showed up for you, if you want to talk about it, share your experiences, and add your piece to the puzzle. I've put a link for sharing your stories on this podcast. You'll go straight to my website and a contact form, and it goes right to my email inbox. I might share my thoughts on some of your stories and maybe offer more insight. Before wrapping up, I've had a lot of clients come to me for therapy for soul wants. And often, during therapy, they have latent abilities that come to the surface during or after the sessions. In soul readings, many of the people I see also have abilities, but they're often affected by entities, ghosts, or black magic. Or emotionally, there are traumas and a toxic environment that prevent them from having or using these abilities. Once the cleansing is done, it's like a rebirth for them. Like I said earlier, when this happens to you, at first, all these abilities can feel like a curse, but after you learn how to handle them, it's okay. Before I forget, there's a genetic component that means some people will have more abilities than others. And yes, we're not all genetically equal, but mediumship is something you can work on too. Some people also work on it with shamans who can help them bring out their mediumship. That's all for this episode of Esoteric Worlds. If you enjoyed it, subscribe, like, and share. See you soon for new adventures.